Cancer has crept among us, the natives. I never realized that any of my families or anyone in my community would be affected by this. My husband was diagnosed with cancer of the esophagus. They told us that he had 6 months to live. 6 months was too short. He didn't live that long. He died on June 1st of that year, 2000. And then my daughter, who is 52 years old now, she was diagnosed with first breast cancer, and then they took care of it. They treated her, so she was okay, and then a year later, she was diagnosed again with cervical cancer. This was the hardest for her. She got over it. She survived. The hardest is my son, Chuck. He was diagnosed with brain cancer in January of 2005. His cancer didn't last very long. We knew that we would lose him, so we were there with him all the time, every day, my son, my daughters, and myself. He was diagnosed in January, and then by February 22nd, he died from cancer. I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer in October of 2006. By November 28th, I had surgery and had my left thyroid removed. And then in January 10th of 2007, I went back into the hospital to have my right thyroid removed. And I had radiation treatments, and I'm a survivor. And that's why I'm very, very concerned about why it's attacking my family. It's just too much.
Linda is not alone. Her story is heard in many families, in many tribes, on many reservations, and in many cities. It is everyone's story. It's the story of why both spiritual health and physical health are culturally important to American Indians seeking cancer care. The goal is to provide a greater understanding of how spiritual care can be integrated with modern medicine into a cancer care program for American Indians, and to identify ways in which people with cancer and their families can be supported spiritually.
The role of spiritual care in cancer treatment is really a basic function in terms of the care of cancer. One of the things that all cancer patients have to deal with is their mental outlook. And the word that all providers say to people who are been diagnosed with cancer or going through cancer treatment is maintain a positive outlook and be positive. And that this is a very important part of what's going to help them in terms of addressing their cancer. And for the American Indian, this is even more important because their lives revolve around many cultural aspects of their being, and the traditional beliefs, the traditional teachings, their way of life is really integrated into the spiritualness of themselves, and to be able to maintain their strong spiritual attitude, their spiritual, meeting their spiritual needs is important to dealing with illness. The American Indian looks in terms of a wholeness, and the spiritual aspect of it is just as important as the physical and the mental. And so this is the spiritual aspect is very much an integrated and comprehensive approach that American Indians have. So to not have that as part of one's dealing with illness and one's dealing with healing is missing a very important part of their life and their outlook and their beliefs. And this has to be a part of any healing process for the American Indian.
I think another big difference and an important difference is that in traditional medicine, we understood that the health of the community has an impact on the health of the family. The health of the family has an impact on the health of the individual. And if we're only focused on care for individuals and we're not incorporating family and community in the healing process, I think that we're missing a big part of the picture when we look at issues in Indian health.
Working two systems of healthcare together, traditional medicine with conventional medicine, is very empowering. There's certain dynamics that happen internally, I think, with patients that we won't be able to explain, but it obviously has good outcomes for the patient. The spirit, I define it as being the attitudes, the emotions, the psychological state of an individual in dealing with their disease process. Being diagnosed with cancer is a devastating impact on any patient's life. And I think it also drills down to the very spirit, the soul of that person. And I've seen that in cases where patients have been diagnosed with cancer or undergoing treatments, when that spirit is alive and when the spirit is full of hope, then there's a change in the whole process of treatment. On the other hand, health is not really about physical well-being. It also incorporates spiritual health. I've seen patients who have been diagnosed with, stage 4 disease with metastases and being on feeding tubes and having lost 50 pounds. But when you sit by their bedside, there's a gleam in their eyes and a smile that just shows you that this person is healthy from a spiritual perspective. It helps them deal with the illness. It helps them deal with the treatments. But also, they're an inspiration. They're an inspiration to their family, to their friends, inspiration to the doctor. I can certainly say there's been so many times that I've been at the bedside of dying patients who have had cancer, and these people really inspire me. They make me feel happy. They make me feel hopeful. It's not because of the physical disease of their body, but because of the spiritual health that they exhibit and they show to others. So it really is so critically important, and even in Native American thinking, or the way we look at life, it's really about mind, body, and spirit. And it's a spiritual component in whatever way they can access it, in whatever way they can develop it, whatever way they can support it, really will benefit the patient, the families, and I'd have to say the doctor too.
I've been able to work with a lot of the traditional healers and the medicine men. And what I found to be very effective is to have essentially a team of traditional healers that I can consult with. So just like if I would consult with a cardiologist for heart disease or a pulmonologist for lung disease, I consult with the traditional healers when there needs to be more of a holistic and spiritual healing process. And there are patients I've done this with very directly, and not necessarily everybody survives a diagnosis of cancer, but in the traditional way, I've seen a healthier approach, even to the dying process. And in Lakota, when I was younger, I even learned that there is a concept of dying healed. And in truth, all of us eventually will go through the dying process. We will all die. And in modern medicine, we tend to view death as the ending and the enemy. And this is the enemy that we try to fight. And that really is an unhealthy approach for the provider and for the families, because it's inevitable that eventually we will die. I think that focusing on dying healed is what's very important. And really that's predominantly in the spiritual realm. I think one thing that's important to remember is that not all Native people are going to focus on traditional perspectives, and that there's really a broad spectrum of American Indians. We have people who are very traditional and those who are very non-traditional. And I think that spiritual experience, just like dealing with a disease, is a very personal process. But I would encourage anyone, whether they have a traditional belief system or maybe a more modern religious belief system, it's important to incorporate that into the healing process. And hopefully you're working with a provider who understands that and is open to that. And I would encourage talking to your provider about your needs from a spiritual perspective as well.
One of the goals within Indian Health Service is to promote spiritual well-being for our American Indian patients and their families. So it is part of the mission of our facility. Our patients receive spiritual care at our facility through the work of two committees, the Volunteer Chaplains Association and also our Traditional Cultural Advocacy Committee. Our Volunteer Chaplains Association is made up of 6 to 8 individuals who provide chaplaincy services. They come from a wide variety of affiliations and denominations. Then our Traditional Cultural Advocacy Committee is made up of American Indian practitioners and made up of community members and many of our staff who promote the spiritual and cultural understandings of the patients that we serve here. There are many ways within American Indian understandings to provide spiritual care or where spiritual well-being happens. There are ways on our campus that we honor that here by providing sweat through our sweat lodge on our campus. Our traditional practice committee has sweat lodge providers, and there are regular sweats that our patients and the community members can participate in. There's also opportunities at our hospital where blessing ceremonies or smudging ceremonies need to take place to restore balance and bring healing to patients and staff, our whole community here. We also have powwows that happen through our Employees Association where we gather as a community and we dance and people sing songs and honor one another, not only of the generations that are here with us, but generations who have passed on, and also the hope for the future generations.
My dad's greatest fear of going to doctors and going and keeping his appointments was that one day he was going to go and the doctor was going to tell him he had cancer and there would be nothing they could do for him. And when we did encounter that, then that struggle was, well, now where do we turn to emotionally, spiritually? And I know right then and there that his heart just sank. I just know it did. He never said, but I knew him well enough to know in all his quietness that he was really thinking about this and what that meant for him now. And I think, if anything, he wished that his wife could have been here to be with him, because he really, really leaned on my mother all his life, and she was his greatest assurance to him. But with her not being here, he turned to us, to my sister and I, his daughters. And he leaned on us, and I knew that, because he could say to us, "I'm scared." And we'd say to him, "It's okay, Dad. It'll be okay. We're scared too, but we'll get through this together. We'll get through this together." But I think the emotions that he went through were from the disappointment to the joy to the disappointment. And I think even to the very end, it finally got to an acceptance. That last month, he finally just accepted it and was able to live that day-to-day living. The community is really where we found our support, the community being the congregation members, or it's a town, or it's a village, those individuals that surround your life, whatever that community is named. For us, it was the church. We found that that's where our support came for our spiritual and our emotional support and strength. My sister and I, as most families and people in general, we have a hard time asking for help. That's not something we do easily. And yet we learned we had to ask for help because we couldn't do it alone with just the two of us. And so we discovered that it was our church, our community, that gave us that support, that gave us their prayers, their presence gave us that strength that allowed us to walk with Dad on his journey.
My name is Lois Steele, and I'm a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2004, and I had 11 positive nodes, so I didn't have that good an outlook, but I'm doing well. I'm also an enrolled member of the Fort Peck Assiniboine Sioux tribe from Montana, and I'm a board-certified family practice physician. These are just 3 aspects of my life that help to influence me in the concepts that I'm going to discuss now. You have to look at your own spiritual well-being because nobody else is going to. And spiritual well-being is the essential aspect to one's journey in healing. You have to figure out who you are at that time. And it's somewhat existentialist to even say that, but you have to figure out who you are, mother, grandmother, tap dancer, physician. What makes you happy? What makes you fulfilled? And then concentrate on the being happy. Studies have shown that the people that are happy actually survive longer. Seek out places that are going to keep your spiritual well-being. I go to the Sundance every year. It's on my reservation. I surround myself with familiar faces, with family, with friends, with people that I care about and that care about me. And we all try to heal one another. We all try to work together to make this Sundance work. If you don't nurture your sense of humor, you're not going to make it. It's going to carry you many, many times when you can laugh about something rather than cry. You have to learn to laugh at yourself. Don't laugh at others, but learn to laugh at yourself. Learn to see humor in the tough situations. Live life to the fullest. Take the risks to change anything that's not working, and try to understand and adapt to the physical changes that are inevitably going to occur into all of us. Maybe not from the cancer, maybe from old age, maybe from anything. We're going to have to be able to handle those changes. In order to keep the spirit strong, we have to understand that changes are going to occur, and we're going to have to change with it. But we need to control those changes.
I think that the most important thing that I have learned in my own traditional medicine training is traditional values, and values like fortitude, wisdom, generosity, courage, honor, respect, and humility. Those are the 7 core values in the Lakota way. And the core value, the most important core value, is humility. And it's said best by Black Elk when he said, "Of course, it was not I who cured. It was the power from the outer world, and the visions and ceremonies had only made me like a hole through which the power could come to the 2-leggeds. If I thought that I was doing it myself, the hole would close up and no power could come through." And I think it's very important to remember this lesson, because what he's talking about is humility. And in the traditional belief system, when you lose your humility, you lose your ability to heal.